Jeff.
Brandon.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, actually.
We've been sitting here right now talking for an hour, just kind of behind the scenes on a few things, but we figured we'd hit record just to get some content going here,
Now
Jeff.
that we got all revved up, we're ready to go.
Absolutely. We're warmed up. We're warmed up. You're into the investing sector.
Yeah, so...
Financial advisory.
Exactly. So I can give you a little rundown on what we're up to here. So I went to university through the late kind of like 2005 to 10. Yeah. Basically graduated at the end of 2009. I had an accounting degree, not a professional accountant or anything like that. So the idea was going to be eventually to get my CPA and do all that stuff. And I did accounting terms at JDI and all those things.
Okay.
Funny thing though, in 2009, nobody hires because we just went through a big economic meltdown.
Which we were talking about on this chart here.
Yes, exactly. And, and I'm working at a forestry company at JDI that I'm looking up at they've got charts, like live charts that show the cost per board foot because I'm in the sawmills division, right?
Right.
And they're saying like, okay, there are no housing starts in the United States, right? That's their main market. And so nobody's building. So you don't need 2x4s. You don't need 2x6s. So basically nobody was hiring. But luckily for me, sales organizations like London Life, Freedom 55 at the time, would just basically take your pulse. And if there was a pulse and you could pass a criminal records check, you got a job. And so naively, I took that. I didn't know what an RSP was. I didn't know anything about stocks. Besides the fact that Marissa's dad on the OC was a financial advisor. Right. They seemed to have a bunch of money, but he got in trouble. So that was all I knew. And so I started there. That was in, I guess, the very start of 2010, Winter Olympics in BC. And
good memory.
We kind of built a little bit there, and I was young and naive, just out of school. I think I spent more money kind of on the boardwalk than investing myself. So actually, I know that for a fact. That's not a guess. Fast forward a few years.
As anybody would at that age, too, though.
Fast forward a few years, married, kids, took a couple career changes, gathering some more institutional experience in around pension plans, things like that. And went back out on my own just before my wife was going to have our first child because I knew your priorities change.
Right.
Your risk change.
Right.
So I said, I'm going to take the jump and do it now before it's too late. And we'd have a year of EI from her. So, so just fast forward to today. I've had different business ventures along the way. One eliminated because of COVID. Actually in the basement of this building. In the basement of this building.
Yes. Okay. So you've been here for a while.
Yeah. So,
this is a beautiful building, by the way.
Thank you. It's
here
right uptown.
Yep.
I get to park underneath the steeple over there.
Absolutely.
Which, thank God, we haven't had a lot of snow because it just drops snow onto the truck. But so fast forward to today, over 2021, 22, 23, basically a lot of us working out of our homes. And I saw where our industry was going, and it used to be a lot of silos, like individuals, right? And, kind of like the real estate market where most real estate agents are kind of on their own. They might be part of a team, but you're going to eat what you kill.
Absolutely.
And so our industry, I can see, is changing to a more team-based, and that's where we get more value because we're doing a lot of advice stuff here. And so I took that time, sitting in the granny suite of my house and, twiddling my thumbs for a little bit. Maybe had to get rid of some of the social media on my taking up too much time. Twiddling my thumbs is swiping.
Right.
But so basically I joined forces with a couple other fellas that were also doing the same thing. My partner Murray, we started in this industry within a couple weeks of each other. And same thing. Like, he was getting his captain's tickets and and took a little career change and stuff. And so,
Right. Which is a major career shift.
yeah, it is, you know,
Captain
for sure.
license being the captain. So he was going to do lobster fishing, wasn't he?
Yeah. Lobster fishing, or working like with like tugboats and things like
Tugboats,
that.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
basically marine services. And so
Yeah.
where we landed here more recently is in this team approach. And we feel we're being fairly unique in what that is, where we're working with mostly business owners is who we have. Like, we've got other people obviously, but mostly business owners. We can create a lot of value by creating plans with them,
Right.
by making sure that there's structure in place, because businesses can kind of have different structures among different, you know, holding companies, trust accounts, different things like that. And then figuring out how we can make sure that this can transition into the next generation or be sold. Big issue here is where we're going. A lot of baby boomers, business owners, whatever. There's going to be a lot of businesses that'll be for sale.
Right.
Not as many buyers. So one of our goals is to help clients get to the point where their business is desirable, first of all, to buy, and that they can get the maximum value and keep the maximum value. Because if you're going to give half of it back to the government, what's the point in working on that extra dollar, right? In a way. And there is a point to do it. Like, I would think you still want to get the extra 50 cents, but there's some strategies that we can work on and how to mitigate some of that tax liability. And hopefully we're actually helping them transition that business in a very cost-effective way.
Right.
So anyway, sorry, that was my 5-minute elevator
No, I love
speech.
that, man. I love
only
it.
go on really slow elevators of really tall buildings. That's my...
I like that. I like that. No, that's a wicked
I go
elevator
on broken
pitch,
down elevators. That's how I get my elevator pitch.
That's a wicked elevator pitch. And the reason I like that is because most business owners, they don't have, like, I know like entrepreneurs, they're very out there, kind of like people orientated, and it's a whole different thing what you're doing. It's a whole different mindset of being able to plan a business structure and even a bit like a business exit. Like, I don't know anything about that. Some people are really good at growing businesses, but there's not a lot of people that are good at managing those things on the back end. Like, I know for me, when it comes to the numbers, that's where my eyes start to kind of like glaze over. Like, I love being out, talking to people, building the relationships, doing this kind of thing here right now. But then when it comes to actually looking at, because I've had a business in the past, and the thing that I was terrible with was managing the numbers. And it's like, that's a whole other skill set. It's a whole other area, but it's so important in business to focus on that. But it's normally two different skills of people who are able to run businesses versus actually manage all of the numbers on the back end. So it's a hypercritical thing that you're talking about.
And I'll even add to that, what you're talking about specifically is running that business. So that's operations. That's like your chief operating officer, maybe your CFO. You're probably a lot smaller than that, but you're talking about just running the business and then handing all your receipts to your accountant at the end of the year going, here you go, like a great big grocery bag full. You start finding them at the bottom of your vehicle and shoebox. Yeah. So typically where most professionals in this area focus is on today, and for the bigger part, if you're an accountant, you're dealing with last year's sins, right? So you're saying, okay, here's my receipts, my revenue, and everything. Make it have less tax than otherwise, right? And accountants are very good at figuring out all the mechanisms that are inside that tax code to get your taxable income down during 2022, because now I'm in 23, 2023, because now I'm in 24. And then they'll give you some advice on, okay, this year, what you should do is change these things around. Out of all the accountants that are out there, probably, and this is just off the top of my head, I have no idea, 5 to 10% of them are working on this year all the way to basically when you sell that business or pass away, whatever. Whatever comes first.
A small percentage of them are actually focusing on that, is what you're saying.
Which comes down to structure, right?
Yeah.
So in real estate, we'll give this as a perfect example. So in real estate, if you have an investment in real estate, 4-unit apartment building, today, the accountant's advice for today is to depreciate that asset because you will have less tax, which means more money in your pocket today. So it's a cash flow business.
Right.
So that's great. But when you sell that building, and almost all buildings are appreciating, right? And they should be. So if now, and I'll use an easy number, if it was $100,000 and you're going to sell it for $200,000, that $100,000 in the middle is a gain.
Right.
In Canada, 50% of that is taxable. So you add $50,000 to your income for the year as a capital gain, taxable capital gain.
Right.
But there's an extra piece in there. Because it didn't actually depreciate, the government wants that depreciation back. So it's called recapture, which means, what did we say? We reduced it down to 50,000? Like we depreciated it down to 50,000?
From the original 100.
Did I say that? I can't remember.
Yeah, you did, yeah. Because we're talking about a $100,000 investment going to 200, and you said there was $50,000 in between that's not being capital gains.
So the gain is 50% included in your tax. So 50% of it is taxable. On the recapture, all of the recapture is taxable.
Recapture.
So that's taking you from your $50,000 because you've depreciated it down to being worth 50. That's what your paper says when you submit your taxes. So that goes from 50 and you just sold it for 200. So you got a favorable taxable situation between the 100 and the 200, which is only 50% taxed, right? Then from 50 up to the 100, because you got to get back to your original cost base. That 50 to the 100 is 100% included. You don't get that 50% break.
Okay.
So right. Now so you've got
taxed differently, is what you're saying.
So now you've got $200,000, right? And that's what you sold it for. You have $100,000 gain that's taxable because there's 50% of the 100 that grew. I shouldn't have used 50 and 50, but and then the $50,000 of recapture to go from the 50 up to the 100.
Yes. Yep.
So that's included. So mark that down. I got to pay on $50,000. And then from the 100 to the 200, 100 is a gain, but only 50% of that is taxable because it's a capital gain, which is taxed favorably. But you have $100,000, taxable gain.
Yeah.
So let's run a couple numbers on that. And this is more unique in real estate, but like, I'll get back to my original point in a second. But
yeah,
that situation there, real estate investors are high leveraged normally.
Right. Right.
So if you leveraged 80% of that 200, you've got $160,000 mortgage.
Right. Yep.
Now you've spent that money somewhere else. It's not just sitting there waiting to pay taxes, right?
Of course not.
So when you sell that building, you sell it for 200.
Yes. Yep.
You got $160,000 mortgage you got to pay off. So you're left with 40. But it doesn't matter what your mortgage is. You have $100,000 taxable capital gain. And if you're in a 53% tax bracket, your tax bill is $53,000 and you only get 40 in cash.
Right. Do you know what I'm just realizing? Is as you're talking about this.
We're not recording?
No. As you're talking about this, Jeff, so you said you went to school to be an accountant as well.
I did. That doesn't make me an accountant at all.
No, I know, but that's such a beneficial, like just as you're talking about all this, I'm like, you almost sound like an accountant when you're talking about it, but then you bring that aspect of your past knowledge into the financial advisory world of creating favorable situations for businesses that are selling. And it's like,
that's right.
That's a very favorable mindset and kind of correlation to bring. As you're sitting here talking about this, I'm like, I feel like I'm talking to an accountant. Well, but then
I'm glad I've bored you that much.
No. But like, just as you're talking about those numbers though, and I can see how you're so passionate about it. And I find it super interesting to talk to anybody that is passionate about that, because I don't share that same passion about the like tracking about like numbers and stuff. When did you realize that you loved doing the financial tracking of like accounting numbers? When did you realize that?
It was the only degree that didn't require you to read a book.
What?
I haven't read a book in my life, so I have no idea how to read. Like I don't. My distractions.
But like numbers is your language.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I've never sat down and read a novel. Like
no.
No, I've never taken an English class or any
I love
history
English.
or anything because it's I like history.
Yeah. As we
I
can
like
see
to
from
speak
this,
English.
as we can see from this chart here right in front of us, I'm not sure if this is on the camera, but we were actually analyzing
What's that,
this
60,
chart as soon as we
70
came
years
in,
of charts,
and this chart here has all kinds of rich history on the financial sector and kind of where the markets were going, and that was it was a really interesting way to kind of walk into this room fast and furious.
Give you a little snapshot of the last 60 years of not just investing, but like geopolitical type stuff inside
too.
of North America, interest rates, inflation. By the way, I didn't show you this green one here.
Yeah, what is the green?
That is the relation of the US dollar to Canadian dollar.
Stop it. No way.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Canada being favorable on top here?
Yep.
So there's only a few moments where Canada's dollar's ever been favorable over the American.
Yeah, not very
and look
much.
how much it swings towards the American side consistently. Now, is that just because they have like our economy is so much more correlated to theirs, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's just smaller. I don't really have too much of an opinion on currency necessarily, but it's certainly.
And then we were
correlated with.
We were even talking about the geopolitical, how policy dictates where the economy and the
it certainly
market
can.
goes as well.
It certainly can because policy will determine where investors will invest, right? So if there's a hard fix on getting out of oil, then they're probably not going to invest a lot in oil, right? Which could cause the cost of oil and thus everything that we depend on to go up, right? So that's sort of what's happened in the last few years. But you would probably see it even way back in the day. Like, it's not the first time we haven't had enough housing for people, right?
Right.
And so the other part is I'm quite passionate about real estate too. So one of the things that is happening right now through the CMHC programs is that we're seeing basically what the 70s had for access to capital to invest in building new buildings. So a lot of the buildings around here, a lot of the old inventory that you see around here was developed the last time CMHC had a real push to grow the real estate market. So this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for a real estate investor to get access to capital to grow quicker. Right. So now you've got people who were, buying a couple fourplexes that are now building a, 48 unit building.
Right. Because they have that leverage.
Because it's the same amount of money down. Right.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Right. So because you can go 5% down instead of 25% down.
Right.
So because of that, you can build 5 times more than you would otherwise. I know that math doesn't work 4 to 48, but in those situations, you start to see the growth of that real estate market that we're going to see. And that's why it's mostly pushed towards multi-units, if you haven't noticed.
Right. Well, because you invest in multi-units as well.
Yes.
And we were kind of talking about that off camera for a little bit about how the narrative can be steered for landlords in an unfavorable way because everybody looks at the landlords as the main issues. But I honestly think that it's I think you can't make blanket statements, right?
No,
and we were kind of saying that.
And I get it.
Do you enjoy being a landlord?
Yeah, for the most part. We've got a little bit of a team now, which certainly helps. One thing that I'll tell you though, we invested in a property last year, in October, and compared to the financial statement that we saw for that building the year before, there was an increase, and I won't say, maybe dollar amounts, but the increase on the plowing, for example.
Right. Just on even all the services involved in running it.
The increase was 80%.
Man, that's crazy.
80%.
Over the last 2 years.
1 year.
Over the last 1 year.
So their contract
Same
last
company?
year? No, because that company wasn't doing it anymore because their insurance and maintenance got too expensive and they couldn't find the labor.
Right. And
the only one left was we don't want to do it, but this is what the cost is: our labor, gas, maintenance, and the biggest thing is their insurance. A lot of their insurance has almost doubled. So that's why a lot of them got out of it.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of them have to charge a higher price. And you got to think about it too. Like, you're plowing a parking lot and, somebody slips and falls, and who are they suing, right? So you understand why the insurance companies are doing that, but it's just
so
crazy.
then who are they suing in that case? Are they suing the business property owner, like whoever owns the land that they slipped and fell on? Are they suing the people that were responsible for plowing it? That's an interesting... I'm sure a lawyer would have a field day with something like that.
It's everybody. They sue everybody, right? Okay. So they sue everybody, and then the insurance companies will subrogate. Do you know what that means?
No.
So you can't have two
subrogate.
You can't have two insurance be out at the same time. So like if you get $100,000 as a payoff or whatever, it goes back to the whoever was at fault, and then that person goes back to the other insurance company. It's basically the insurance companies start to exchange the risk back and forth between each other. You only get one payout, but then they kind of figure out what's going to happen, right? So everybody basically gets sued. You go to the right lawyer, they're suing everybody. And and it's not a big thing in Canada these days, or sorry, it hasn't been. These days it's becoming more and more, right? And especially if you make it harder and harder for people to live, like somebody hurts, gets off work, like they're gonna need to get paid somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So that's one issue on plowing and things like that. Obviously maintenance is up. Insurance for us is up.
Right. It seems like the price of everything is up, right? The price of everything. I mean, even the materials when it costs to repairs, and the price of services when it costs to bringing in, let's say, electricians or plumbers or anything along those lines. All of the prices have been up. We were saying a crazy stat earlier, how 40% of the currency that's currently circulated was printed within the last 3 years.
Yeah, as far as I know, I have never actually checked that, but this is what I'm seeing and hearing. And
I've looked that up. I've looked it up, and it's very close. So almost half of the money circulating right now is printed within the last few years. You can run that on Google. That's a real stat.
So the value of the asset hasn't necessarily gone up. It's the purchasing power to buy that asset that's gone down.
Right. And then the purchasing power to buy all the other things involved, like the plowing.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Everything. Groceries, everything. And the other thing too, that's a very big misconception about inflation.
Yeah.
So people think, okay, the inflation's down to 3%. That means 3% higher than when it was the highest ever last year. Like, and inflation is a measure of what something costs relative to what it used to cost, right? You're never going to see inflation. Well, you might, but very rarely are you going to see costs of things actually go down, right? It's the new norm. So they're saying 3% based on 2023. Well, if I remember correctly, during 2023, inflation was quite high.
Right.
So it's now compounded. So it's 3% higher than the 8% it was last year. So when people sit around and they're going to wait for something to go on sale, or they're going to wait for something to be less expensive, or they're okay with the amount of income they're making because they're like, oh, don't worry, inflation can't be this high forever. It's like, it's not that it's inflation and price are different. Like inflation is just a measure of the price versus last year or 4 years or whatever you're using.
Right.
Price of something is staying up.
And it always does. Nobody ever takes that back. Once they get a firm price on something, nobody ever scales it back and goes, okay, because inflation's leveling out, we're going to actually make the service cheaper. Yeah. That doesn't exist.
No, most likely not. Now
we're a forward-thinking society. Everybody's always moving forward. It's a more. It's almost a human psychology and a human.
Do you know how you can get prices down?
You get prices down
in a general market
by having more supply. more supply. It's a supply and demand factor, right? So the more supply you have of something, then it's going to lower the price, because if it's readily available, then it makes it much cheaper for everybody to get, just like real estate, right? That's a big reason why the real estate prices have been going up so much, is because you were talking about housing puts and housing starts. Like, there's not enough homes being built right now to keep up with the supply of people coming in to the province and even into the country as well. We have so much demand and not enough supply. So then, well, what happens with that commodity that we're talking about, housing? Then the price goes up, and it continues to go up until that supply and demand equal out. So I guess that would be how I would control it.
The demand is less than the supply,
right? Which
and so
almost doesn't exist in housing.
A simple way in a market to drive prices of anything down is to increase the amount of competition.
Right.
Most people, how do I put this? There's not a lot of competition out there in any market in Canada right now. A lot of it's been driven out because of overregulation or bad policies, or the fact that the government is the supplier to a lot of this. Right. In New Brunswick, our government supplies us like literally drugs and alcohol. Right?
It's true, yeah. And they regulate that.
That's why the cost is so much. Moosehead Breweries, if we go out the back window, I can see Moosehead Breweries.
Right. You could walk in and grab a can if you needed to.
I can.
And it's the same price.
I cannot buy a case of Alpine at Moosehead Breweries for as cheap as I can in the Calais duty free.
Right. Do you know when I realized this? When I was living in Alberta, in my early 20s, I noticed that any local brewed beer was significantly cheaper than anything that they brought in. And I'm like, how come it's not like that in New Brunswick? Like, we have Moosehead Breweries, just like you said. But the government regulates it. So I guess in this case, the province is regulating that price. And we don't get it any cheaper, like you said, even though it's made right here. And shout out to Moosehead Breweries. I haven't drank in quite some time, but they make a very good brew.
Yeah. Are we on day 75 yet for you?
53. Day 53 right now.
So actually, to go back to finishing that clip about accountants doing very good work to get your taxes down today, right? So that you have more cash flow to grow and build your business. So that's all good stuff, right? However, what I like to focus on is sort of those established businesses that are, maybe within 10 years of there could be a transaction. We're going to sell it to somebody. We're going to pass on to the next generation. Now we got to start to get into some planning from not just last year and this year, next year and to that trigger point, right? So, so where we fall is in that piece, right? Maybe it makes sense to change the way that we do things. We already have good cash flow. We're an established business. Maybe it makes sense to focus on what's going to happen on that day that we make a sale. And so, or if we pass away too, because that's the other thing. Everything's triggered on death, right? That's when CRA deems that you've basically disposed of all your assets at fair market value the day you die. So whatever the value is less whatever you paid for it is your gain. Whether it's been sold or not. So there's been no cash generated at this point, right?
Right, okay.
Unlike if I sold you my business and then I got the cash to pay off my bills.
Right.
This happens whether you sold or not. It's deemed to be sold because...
Oh, no. Because someone else is taking it over? Is that why?
Not even.
Like if you have the business in a will?
Yeah. When it moves, changes hands, there's a taxable event. Right? And so... on death, you're deemed to have disposed it at fair market value, whatever that is, on that day. Even if you didn't sell the business. So I've seen it where businesses are, I'll give you a random number, but I've seen it where businesses are worth $500,000 the day that somebody died. They never found a buyer for that business, so they just shut it down.
Yeah.
But the taxes were due as if they sold it the day they died. Still.
And the taxes are due to who in that instance?
CRA. And
who's responsible to pay the CRA?
The estate.
The estate, right? Oh, that's so
This
gross.
is why you end
Right,
up with a
right.
lot of things through probate and all this stuff, and people's bank accounts get locked up because they got to find out where they're going to get the money. It's a mess, right? Because there's no
Right.
planning done, and that's where
Right.
where we come in is dealing with the planning
Because most people wouldn't think
now
about
until
that.
the future, and they don't think about it until after they sold the business, when their accountant goes, "Oh yeah, by the way,
And by that
because
time, it's too late. And by that time, it's too late is what you're saying.
And if you're only using your accountant to do your tax returns,
Right.
That's all they want to do is
Right.
okay. By the way, I sold my business, and it's just like when you have your receipts. They're like, oh, by the way, and I sold my business last year, and they're going, okay, I'll try to get the taxes down as low as possible. Here's your tax bill, and they go, what?
Right.
So I get to keep almost none of that money that they gave me.
So then when
because
you
there's been no planning ahead of time, and that's where
Right.
we specialize in, and we involve the accountants as well, right? So we typically will involve either their accountant or an accountant that is much more into that structure.
So you do work with the accountants a lot when you're talking about this business strategizing.
Absolutely.
You have
we
to,
bring
right?
we bring them right in here. That's why we got a bigger boardroom, because
Yeah.
I want to bring the accountant in with the client and develop those strategies, right? And one of the things that we do is kind of gather the information first. So I'm going to find out what's important to you, where you want, what you want to do with your money ultimately, how you're going to spend it down the road.
Right.
We talk to the accountant to actually get the proper structure set up based on the needs that we've kind of uncovered from you, right? And so one of the issues that you always see is that sometimes there's a disconnect, right? An accountant might say, the best way to mitigate this is do this, 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 and this, and sell it to some company, right? But in sitting down with the client, I'm all about talking about like legacy and like those kinds of words, estate and stuff like that.
Right. Talk about the long-term vision.
Yeah. There's a lot of business owners that will not sell to certain companies or just anybody because their employees are basically family, right? Mm-hmm. Their company is sponsoring the local hockey team. And like, but if you just sell it to the highest bidder,
they want
it
those
might
core values to remain within the company.
So that's where the balance between the math and what you really want kind of has to be played out. And our role is kind of in that middle spot, right? We're going to create a plan that's tailored to you.
Right.
Because if it's not tailored to you, you can just run calculators on an Excel spreadsheet and figure out the best way to do certain things. It's not that hard. The hardest part is to uncover what it is that you want as a business owner with what you've created.
So if somebody's looking to sell a business, how early in advance do you think they should start preparing their business and talking to someone like yourself? When, is that as early as possible? As soon as you're thinking of selling, or
it can be. I mean, and you're going to think about like, tech companies are great with this, right? They are thinking about the exit strategy in their business plan.
As soon as they start,
before they get the first investor, right? Because they have an investor that says, you're not holding on to my money for 10 years.
Right.
So tech companies gear towards planning much more than
a mom and pop shop per se.
Mom and pop shop that they started with a dump truck and now he's got a fleet. Right. And does very well at that. And probably will never actually retire unless he can't get in that truck or the excavator or whatever.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't start doing some planning. Right. And the planning will change over time. From brand new, we want to, just like the accountant's doing, right? Writing stuff off, getting as much cash flow to continue to grow. Then you get to an established business. Now we have some other planning needs, right? Maybe we're looking at going from $1 million company to a $10 million company or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
And then you get the 10 million. Now you're in a preservation type mode where you're going, okay, I've risked everything to build this company. I've worked weekends. I've worked nights. I've lost sleep. Yeah. I haven't had a vacation in 5 years.
Anybody who's built anything, right?
Exactly. And so now it comes to the point where I don't have it in me again to lose sleep, to work every single day, every weekend, every evening,
right?
To forego the like your Your goals change a bit.
100%.
So
and
now
normally
we're in
the
a
reason
preservation
people
mode.
get into that, normally the reason people get into pushing so hard is to eventually have that time freedom on the back end. So
Yeah.
it's like they're sacrificing the present few years to
Yeah.
decades so that they can have more freedom and time freedom on the back end is what you're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
And what's the plan to do that? Because if you've built a business that's completely surrounded by you, you can't go away for a month.
Right. And that's almost what happens because people come into business with the intention of saying, I want to create a lifestyle for myself that has more flexibility and freedom and financial freedom. And all of those things I think are important to anybody who's going into business. What they don't realize is normally they end up, like you said, they end up building something that entails and needs them so much that they become actually more involved and they actually have more responsibilities
That's right.
as it goes on and it gets larger and larger and larger.
I'm going to add an extra piece to it, and this is what I think about when I sit down with a client that's telling me this stuff. If they can't go away for a month, if I'm a buyer of your business, that's a risky business to buy.
Right.
If you can leave that business as the owner and it's running smoothly without you, that's a business I want to buy.
Right.
Because I don't have to go.
Right, exactly.
I pay my-
That's a real business, though, right? Then that's a real business.
Now,
and
it's comparable to one of those, like, what we would call a passive asset, like a piece of real estate, right?
Yeah.
If I just got to show up every once in a while and make sure things are good and fix the gutters and make sure that the plow guy actually showed up once in a while, now that's a real investment. And so if there's no reason to buy a one person operation, by the way.
No.
And so one of the ways that I
buying
coach
yourself a job.
Yes. And so, I mean, listen, there is,
Yeah.
but not for an investor.
No, absolutely.
There is for somebody who doesn't want to work for, Kent Building Supplies anymore, and they're going to go out and buy the tools from the carpenter that he sees every day.
Yep.
But you're not really buying goodwill. You're not buying a brand necessarily. You're just buying some hammers and nails, and you're going to go and do your thing.
Yeah.
So what I like to coach people on is getting to the point where their business is worth it as a business, right? Just because you got a business number doesn't mean that you have a business, right? As far as something that's saleable, that's an asset, right? Mm-hmm. You get to the point where you can hire you as the CEO. You're the CEO of my business now. You report to me every month of what's going on, what we need. Strategic moves, right? It's running without me though, mostly. So I'm willing to focus on the next business that I've invested in or the next business that I want to start. Maybe I do want to be that on the ground again, right? But I can't be distracted by this other business. You're going to take care of it for me. That's an investable business. I'm going to go do this other sole proprietor thing to see if I can get that going. And then if I can repeat that and now have another CEO to do that, now you're freeing up your time to continue to grow and build wealth and have something to sell down the road.
Right.
So, for example, I had a friend of mine that had started a business and he was doing quite well. And it was in the kind of a niche market, like just doing very hands-on. Basically, I don't want to give it away.
No, absolutely, yeah.
But but this he was doing it all himself.
Yeah, like a one-man show.
Yep. And then
No employees.
No employees.
Right. But doing really well.
Doing well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So he was netting. He was netting out over $100,000.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Great job.
Excellent.
Awesome little business, right?
Great spot to be.
First year, by the way.
Oh, my soul.
And so
whoever that is, congratulations.
Yeah. So then he hired two guys and kind of got some contracts.
Okay.
Right? To do that.
Yeah.
His role changed from being on the machine to business development. Going and getting some going to get some clients.
Clients, yeah. Kind of like the lead generation
or customers
now.
or whatever.
More contracts, yeah.
Yep. And
finding work for the guys at that point, kind of deal.
Exactly.
Or gals,
and
whatever
looking,
it is.
And looking for other businesses to work with and do business with, maybe even buy into.
Right.
So I said to him, I said, this is an interesting paradigm shift. I said, so like if we were doing a net worth statement for you right now, last year you made 100 grand on this. Awesome, right? If you didn't have any of that cash left, by the way, no value. Your business was worth nothing, right? Besides whatever the equipment you had. Now he's got the 2 employees, whatever, business coming in, some contracts. Mm-hmm. It's operating mostly without him. He's just bringing some stuff in, but he's getting things rolling. Like the ball has got some momentum, right?
Good spot to be, yeah.
He still made 100 grand net.
Okay.
Even with the extra employees, all that stuff.
Right.
Now here's the difference. Last year, he was worth nothing. This year,
to a
same
potential
net,
buyer, you mean?
Right, to a buyer, right?
Right.
And that's all that matters, right? If no one's going to give you the money for it, it's not worth anything, right?
Right,
And this
exactly.
is kind of the free market,
Market
right?
value. Market value, yeah.
And I just assigned a multiple, different businesses at different multiples, right? So I said, same company, doing the same things, just more volume now. Net income, the exact same, 100,000.
Net income the same, yeah.
Right? But to assign a small multiple, this company's worth $200,000 now.
Right.
And last year it was worth
somebody
nothing.
could come in and buy it now.
Yeah, because
there's an operation.
Because I can give you a check for $200,000.
Yep.
And I can wait for my $100,000 to come in.
Right. And you're not needed to be there all the time. It's so
right.
then the person buying it isn't buying an integral role in the company. There's already operations. So,
and by the way, that value
where,
right there is actually quite good. I get my money back in 2 years.
Right.
So
normally when people
easy,
are
right?
selling, so I know you just said every industry's got a different type of valuation. Is there like a rule of thumb when you're going to sell a business that you sell it off of like the income for the last X amount of years? I've heard that many times.
Yeah, so you kind of smooth it out.
It's like a business is worth like, what is it, like 4 years or something of their yearly income?
It's a negotiation, right?
Yeah.
So, some people are going to say my business is worth this, and it's really based on nothing.
Yeah, almost like somebody coming up and saying my house is worth this. It's like, well, there's comparables. There's
an easy way to do it is what kind of terms you can get from your bank if you're going to go and borrow it, right? So if the bank isn't going to give you a 25-year loan, don't give them 25 times revenue because you got to pay that back in 5 years. So how are you going to do that? The math doesn't work. But typically, I would say any business owner that has any net income, I would say that most likely if you're already making money and the net income's after you've kind of paid yourself, easy number, just double your net income, and that's the starting point.
Okay.
You're going to want to negotiate higher, obviously.
So that's a good baseline starting point. Okay, that's good to know.
But I
then.
like to not. I would say minimum. That's
minimum, 100%. Right.
It should be worth 2 times earnings.
At least,
right?
Right.
And that's almost any business.
That's where you start the conversation. Yeah.
If it can run without you.
If it can run without you. So then what you're saying is, like, I guess the importance of operations and systems in businesses. That's what I'm getting from this conversation is you're really adding valuation and you're really creating value within a company once you start to implement systems that don't require you. Because I've heard of a lot of people who want to sell a business, but they need to be like on salary. So it's like, but we're going to keep you as the operations and we want to now pay you an X amount of dollars. Like you hear that a lot of times when people go to sell, that the person operating it, because it's like they build themselves into the business, which is hard not to do when you're so involved in a business. So it's this fine balance of finding a way to build something that doesn't completely require you.
Because it's also hard because, you got to check your ego.
That's a big part of it.
Because
it's like you want to be
I'm
important.
the business. It's like, well, you actually want this business to be worth anything. You better not be the business, right? So
I love that you said that because that is so true.
And it's extremely hard because
and people pride themselves on that. They pride themselves on being so needed in that business.
Well, and part of it is because we've got a little bit of a scarcity mindset for sure, right? Everybody does. Yeah. And so one thing about that ego in building a business. So you've got a successful business. It does rely on you though, right? Part of that ego is because you ate crap for 10 years to get there. Mm-hmm. You weren't making $200,000. You were making $20,000 and barely getting by and borrowing money from your father-in-law or something, right?
For years.
So once you get it and you make it and you're like, I'm earning some income now, of course you're going to have some ego.
Of
and
course.
It's me and it's somebody else. And you fear that if somebody that works for you, because they say this to you, they'll say it right to your face. They'll say, you're making a ton of money off of me, right? Like I could do this on my own. And so you fear that somebody else is going to go and do what you did.
Right.
But you forget that most people aren't willing to go through that.
Right.
So you should really be able to, if you sit back and reflect, you should be able to sit back and check that ego and then say, okay, it's time for somebody else to come in and run this. Somebody that doesn't want to have to go through all that crap.
Right.
And if you can do that, like, so that might be the person you sell to.
Yep.
Or even better, it becomes your, for lack of better terms, your CEO. And you can do this in even a small 5-person company. Like I'm not talking like, you got to be a 2,000 employee company to talk this way.
Right.
You bring in an operator to your business and you can start spending time on what you really are good at. And I'm just talking business. I don't mean like you're going to go sit and sip margaritas all the time, but
No, right.
You focus on the 20% of the whole business that you're working on that you're actually good at and that you enjoy.
Yeah.
See where you're going to go then, right?
Yeah. It's like the book I'm reading right now by Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time.
Yeah. I got it on my desk.
Yeah. It's really good. So I'm actually listening to the audiobook and that's what he talks about.
Yeah.
Is like when you're hiring, you should be hiring people that do the things that you're not good at and you should continue to do what you're good at because the things that business owners are good at, they really thrive in. It's like if you put all of your time into what actually makes you the most amount of money and that brings you the best reward or return, then it's like, that's where the real juice is in any situation.
We've been lied to that we need to continue to improve on our shortcomings.
Right. This is like a thing that Gary Vaynerchuk says a lot of times too.
Yeah. Double down on what you're good at.
On what you're good at.
And and stop being good. Now you're the expert or whatever, right? Like I'm never going to organize my paperwork correctly ever. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
I can work on it, but you know what?
Why?
We can probably get somebody else to do that for me.
100%.
That would be happy to do it because their brain works in that kind of an organized way. Mm-hmm. My brain works quite high level.
Yeah, I can tell.
And conceptual.
I can tell.
Coming up with concepts and things like that. If I have to get into the weeds on something, it kind of stops all that creativity.
But then that's why you were talking about originally bringing a team in. And that's why the importance of a team and that dynamic is so crucial. And I think you're seeing a lot of that. Even in the real estate world, you're seeing more teams come together as well. And it's because one person never is able to do it all. One person can never do it all. So let's say if you were just by yourself, the value that you're able to give to a client is everything that you bring to the table. But now you have a team, the value you bring to that client is the whole dynamic of everybody.
Exactly.
All the moving pieces. You get the full package.
So you
get the high level thinking of your mind, you get the organization, you get everybody else's thoughts and opinions in there as well. And you get all of that collaborating together in this synchronized harmony that just creates magic.
That's right. That's how you create magic. And I'll tell you, this is so for my team here with Wealth Plan Atlantic.
Yeah, Wealth Plan Atlantic. Yeah, no, absolutely. Anybody who's looking at needing any advice in business, to grow their business, to get the business to a point where they want to sell it, just have the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Jeff's got an amazing office here uptown. And
that's right.
Yeah. Highly recommended.
And the way that I've described sort of how our team works, and specifically me, because, listen, we were generalists for years, right? We would just be like, you have $1 to invest, get in here, right? So, you're just picking up the pieces. You're just hitting the streets, trying to get as much business as you can and realize like where I'm adding more value is in certain areas. And so over the last few years, I've really kind of reflected on that, which is why we've brought this team together. So to give you, I'm big on analogies. I love it.
Yep.
So, if we're out, on a fishing trip, we're going to be successful fishers. Do you know why? Because I will continue to cast that line and pull that fish into the boat. and this is actually real life, because this is all I like about fishing too, is hooking the fish.
Are you a big fisher?
No, because I don't like the rest of it. I just like hooking it, and then I'm like, oh no, I got a fish on the line. What do I do?
Right.
So this is where I am in business too. Is that I like to the concepts, get the concept bought in, and yes, let's do that. Okay, sounds good. I've got the fish on the line. I got it to the boat. I'm not even pulling it out of the water. I need somebody else to take the hook out, got the fish, cook it up, do all that.
Right.
I just want to bring in the fish, right?
Yeah.
And so that's my role here. It's kind of like in a business development role. It's bringing in people and
Right.
sharing with them some concepts, and then the rest of my team gets more into the weeds.
Okay.
And to the point where, we start doing some paperwork and things,
planning
like that.
and strategizing. Yeah.
I'm talking about sort of the higher level. I'm getting the hook in, and then we're moving on. So that's where my energy levels go, and that's where I see the most fulfillment. Other people have a hard time casting a line or hooking a fish, so they want to work on some of the other stuff.
Right.
And listen, we could eat fish all day long if we got the right team here to hook, cut, gut, 100%. Barbecue, whatever, right?
100%.
So that's my analogy.
That's the
for,
team
for
analogy.
what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Is not everyone's a good angler. Not everyone's a good cook.
No.
Right? And
finding your specialty, just like you said, back with the Gary Vaynerchuk thing, right? Find what you're good at, focus on that, and then hire people around you to do the rest.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's not even it's not even that I'm good at it or not good at it. Some of the stuff I don't want to do.
Right.
And it's a distraction.
100%. Yeah.
Right. And so if I can just work on what fulfills me, I'm going to feel better. Everyone around me is going to feel better. Because I can get grumpy. If I get a little too grumpy, it's like, I don't know if I want to be around that guy today. He's not very fun. But
right. No, man, you can definitely tell you're passionate about it. You can definitely tell you have a high level passion. And like I said at the very beginning, like as we got talking right at the first, it was very very in depth on the numbers. And at that point I could see your eyes light up, and I'm like, you are so passionate about the numbers in depth. And I think you have a really kind of really excellent full package to offer. Just the way that your brain works with the accounting background. So like really enjoying the numbers, but then also having that high level strategy of finding ways to make things work. I can't believe you don't read books, because you seem like somebody who would read a lot based on everything.
Some audiobooks going on.
Audiobooks, yeah.
I'll tell you the reason I can't read books is because I might be able to sit down and read like some murder mystery or something. I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe. Don't have a ton of time for that, and I don't really care to do it. Yeah. But say I was so Dan Martell's book's been sitting on my desk, right?
Yeah.
I also have the audio file. So
yeah, I'm halfway through.
But I bought the book itself because I do like to have books around, and sometimes it's nice to flip it open and look.
Absolutely, yeah. That one especially seems like it would be a good book to have.
My problem with reading books is it sparks an idea, and that idea immediately goes into action in my brain, and I don't know what I've read the rest of the book. Like the first idea that pops up, I should do something. And then, all of a sudden I'm building an Excel sheet with, it's like, what am I doing? Like, I was reading that book over there. I don't know how I ended up over here, but and it's just the distraction that happens in my brain, right? I mean, if I have the ability to hyper focus on something, maybe, but most likely, if I can spark a good idea, then I move to the conversation, or if there's somebody I can bounce it off of, or I start to implement it, or I start scribbling down some plans, or it just happens in my head, and I still continue reading, but I haven't read a thing
because
for pages.
You're stuck on that one thought of what you need to do now. Exactly.
I don't know how many times I've picked up books and been like, I'm going to jump back in that book. I got a few minutes, whatever. And then I'm 3 pages in and realize I've read this entire chapter, and I didn't even notice until,
I used to read like that. Like there's times, or sometimes you're reading and you're thinking of something different.
Yeah.
and you're actually not even intaking the information that you're
true.
you're reading.
I find the same way with like conferences and stuff too. Like if you go to like industry conferences or,
Right. You'll get
or
one
business
little
conferences,
piece.
you just need a nugget.
You
That's
just get
the
one
only
little
reason
nugget.
you're-
Well, that's the cool thing about conferences too, is you get that one little nugget, and if you can take it back and action on it, and sometimes you never know what that nugget is, and it can be, there could be like the best keynote speaker in the world at a conference, but you actually get the nugget from the person who was sitting beside you because you had a little side conversation, and then something they said sparked something that you needed to hear, and they said it in the right way, and then you go back and implement that, and then like could change your whole game.
The most valuable
Conferences are cool.
The most valuable seat in any of those conferences is the bar stool in the hotel lobby.
Right.
Where everybody's staying.
That's true.
Where everybody's kind of been energized. Everyone took a little different nugget from different pieces of that conference. And then you start to have discussions.
Yes.
And you chat with everybody. Like it's funny because obviously we have good times when we go to a conference and stuff like that, and you get a couple of drinks going and some food, and you stay up a little bit too late, and even though it'd be nice to just sleep the whole night through, but when you're away from home and there's no kids, and you're like, oh, I should actually get a good night's sleep, but you don't.
I was in a conference in Vegas not too long ago.
Wow, that's a different story.
I think I slept probably 8 hours in the full 5 days I was there, but I tried to take as much in as possible too, right? Because you want to soak it all in and meet all these people and have as many high-level conversations as you can.
But it's funny because I think the perception of anybody who's never gone to these work conferences is either it's all just black tie event or you're partying. You're like actually out partying, and there's sometimes that happens, but mostly no, you're just up late talking about business with other business owners, other professionals, other people that are in the same kind of mindset as you, because it's very hard. Even this conversation here flows very well because you're like an entrepreneur. Both of us are in the real estate. But a lot of times you can't have conversations with people who don't have businesses because they don't understand something, right? For example, like if I have you heard of the 80-20 rule?
100%. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm trying to get to.
20% of your
Clients.
actions are going to bring 80% of your revenue. And it's just like the same in the closet. Like you actually only wear 20% of the clothes that you have. The other 80% are just clothes that sit in the closet. But it's so true. I was like, oh, what a beautiful rule. Because it's so true on so many levels.
So when you look at it, so Dan Sullivan.
Okay.
So him and Benjamin Hardy, I want to say the name is, wrote a book called The 10X is Easier Than 2X.
Interesting.
So
okay.
I encourage you to read it or listen to it like I did. One of the things that they discovered in some research, and I don't know what they use for research, but basically if you took your top 20 clients for revenue and also who you want to deal with and eliminated the other 80%, your revenue will take about 24 months to return to the same level as if you still had, like if you use
2 years then. Okay.
So because you're only focusing on what makes you money.
Will it 10X? Is that what it's saying?
Well, that's part of the whole formula, but yeah. So, so what I was going to just make one point before we jump into that 10X thing is that most people have a hard time understanding why I would dump 80% of my clients, for example.
Right.
Which I'm not doing, by the way.
Which I'm not doing. Yeah. No.
But like,
we're just talking theory here.
But like in theory, to bring that rule up and talk to somebody who all their income comes from one source, which is their employer, it's very hard for them to understand that I might take 80% of my business and, sell it off or move it or do whatever and only focus on 20. They would say, well, what? But I don't even understand.
Yeah.
So
it's almost counterintuitive.
So that's why those conferences with like-minded people who are in very similar situations is so good, because in general, we typically aren't around people that can understand some of these little things that we need to do for strategy, right?
Well, everybody's in their own fields too, right? So you and I have a fairly integral kind of like field where we're working with markets, the real estate market, price, like figuring out pricing and having clients, and kind of pretty well like you and I both run our own business in order to succeed.
Yeah.
And that's why when you go to a conference with a whole bunch of like-minded people, you are surrounded in that moment by a whole bunch of other individuals. And normally the people that go to conferences are normally doing well because it costs money to go to conferences.
That's right.
So then you're around all these other high-level performers. And the nice thing, too, is it takes you out of the market. So here's one thing that I loved about going to a couple conferences last year, is it took me out of this New Brunswick mindset.
Yes.
Where
Absolutely.
in New Brunswick, you're comparing yourselves, or even in Saint John, we're comparing ourselves to the other individuals that are in our field here. But then when you step out of that and realize that there's so many larger fish out there, you're like, oh, I could be learning from all of these people and comparing myself to them. And then it sets higher kind of goals, and it just pushes you outside of your comfort zone because you're around all these people who are doing the same thing you're doing. And one thing I love about it is you realize that the people that are where you want to be, they're similar to us. Like when you're talking to them after hours, you're like, oh, this isn't a superhero. They're just very intentional with what they're doing. They're very organized and they're very systematic. It's like they just have a different, going back to what we were talking about, almost systems and procedures in place.
Yeah.
And then if you can take anything from them and learn anything and bring it back and instill that into your own business, I think that there is almost limitless potential as to what you could achieve. And you do that enough times.
Before even the systems, you have a paradigm shift where you are thinking
up here.
differently, right? And so I used to go to these conferences and hear about what some of these guys were doing. I was like, how are they doing that?
How? Right. How do they manage all those clients? How do they do it all?
Yeah. And now we're kind of in a realm where some of those people that I looked up to, I'm like, how did they do that? I'm kind of there, and it's becoming normal thought.
Right.
And so it's normal for us to do this, right? And
right.
The other rule that people always say is you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
It's so true.
So when you're getting started and you're in the bullpen and you're like all around a bunch of people, like I was 21 when I got started, right?
Yeah.
And we're all just sitting there going like, you guys want to go for coffee?
Right, because that felt like a productive thing to do. Right, yeah, just doing what you thought was the right actions to take,
and
which
so
you quickly realized, but that's the learning process too.
Yeah, just graze the surface of a little more controversial topic, but if you play that, everything we were just talking about, mindset and paradigm shifts, and you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, you see why certain social issues that we're seeing right now are going to be very hard to improve upon because everyone's gathered together. So if I'm talking about, when they would stick all the poor people all together in one building. Mm-hmm. Everybody around them sees the exact same thing. Everyone learns how to, I don't want to say cheat the system, but they learn that part of us is to live off the system. Yeah. That's what they see. The average 5 people that they're spending the most time with, that's what they're doing. Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, sounds good. And the guy goes and gets a job as an idiot, right? Same thing that's happening in like homeless encampments, tents, right? Is that they're spending their time with everybody around them. And I get this is a very complex issue, and this is why I just wanted to skate across it. But it's because it's very complex.
Right, it is a very complex issue,
no one
but I know
answer,
where you're going
sure.
because it's
but if you're around everybody else who's of the same exact mindset, it's very hard for you to get out.
It's hard to change.
Right. And I get there's some other stuff in there. There's obviously some mental issues. There's obviously some drug abuse. There's just different things. Right. I get that. There's money issues. Like, I know expert here. But what I would say is you can use the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with to your advantage. Right.
Right.
Go spend some time with people that are a little bit better than you.
It's like the saying, if you're...
And not better, I mean.
It's like saying that if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're probably in the wrong room. Right? And I think, so you're talking about surrounding yourselves with the right people, because if you didn't go to those conferences, then you wouldn't be thinking that the high level thoughts that you're having now are normal. So like before I went to the conferences with EXP, it was like so many people there are doing video. So many of them are doing these things that here are almost considered cliche, but then when I'm around them, they're like, no, this is how I got to where I'm going. And it's like, these are the actions I took. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. And you start to then think that the actions that you may have thought were cliche before are actually the normal ones, which makes them easier to do because there's less mental resistance. And you're actually almost performing, like you're almost trying to compete with colleagues at that point too. There's so many different benefits to that. And I get like, it doesn't work for everybody. We're extroverted. Yeah. So we really do absorb everybody around us. And so I get why that is, right? Yeah. So that's from my paradigm where I'm looking at things. Yep. That's where I see the issues that are happening with, people that are constantly being pulled down by the people around them, right? Yep. And I grew up in like some small towns, and there's some little groups of people, and all they want to do is just get a government job because that just meant that they were going to get an income for life, basically, right? So, not that there's anything wrong with that, but for me, it wouldn't fulfill me to be in a government job. I just couldn't. I want to do more. I want to contribute more. I want to see results, so it just wouldn't work for me. Yep. But a lot of people, that's great. No, absolutely. And as long as it makes them happy, right? As long as it makes people fulfilled, I think is the important part. Yeah. As long as people are fulfilled with what they're doing. And I'm the same as you, though. Yeah. I could not do that because it would not make me feel fulfilled. And that's not to say that it's wrong if someone else feels fulfilled doing that. There's a lot of things like I couldn't do. You're just a cog in a very big engine. And to me that I just didn't feel I want to be a cog. Right. No. Right? And it's to each person, they'll find their own fulfillment in something. Awesome. Okay. This is good. All right. We're Jeff, thank you very much, man. That was amazing. Thank you, man. Thank you so much. You're a super interesting person to talk to. And I have a feeling we'll be doing this more because we barely scraped the surface of anything today. Hope so. We were just, there's so much stuff we could talk about. I didn't even start drawing anything. That's right. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Great.